Baruch Hashem, you're a bad Jew.
Shalom.
Hey, happy hump day. Welcome back to another episode of Bad Jew, the place where there is no such thing as a bad Jew. I am not sure Jews officially call Wednesday hump day, but I've heard it called that. So weird intros aside, with me today is none other than Daniel. Daniel, welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Thank you. It's great to be here on hump day.
Absolutely. So Rabbi Steinberg, I'm really looking forward to getting to know you better, but in order to get to know you better, we have the right of entry into the podcast, better known as the 4-minute Bad Jew Challenge, where you tell your life story in 4 minutes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Excellent. Chaz, Daim, Shalosh, Yalla.
Okay. So I grew up in Binghamton, New York, upstate New York. Went to a Hebrew day school over there. Lived in Syracuse for a little bit. Rochester. Went to a Yeshiva high school in Rochester for 2 years, and then in New York City for 2 years. And when I graduated, I ended up getting an internship at Saturday Night Live, of all places. I worked over there for a season. And then from there, I ended up working for the Howard Stern Show in New York City, where I was an intern and a writer. Did stand-up comedy for a couple of years and ended up in the middle of the night waking up and deciding, hey, maybe I should go to Israel and check back in with my roots. And it wasn't until about 7 years later that I came back to America, married now with a kid, and ended up doing Jewish outreach in Palo Alto, California. From there, after about 4 years, I went to Columbus, Ohio, and did Jewish outreach over there, and still toying with stand-up comedy a little bit, and then eventually went into digital marketing, and most recently was an interim rabbi at one of the Orthodox synagogues here in Columbus, Ohio. And now I train other rabbis and teachers how to speak with deliver transformative sermons and public speaking. And that's, I don't know, came under 4 minutes, but that's my story.
Oh, yeah. You use that very well. You have 2.5 minutes left. Do you want to keep it there, or do you want to keep going?
Well, yeah, we could dive into anything. Basically, in a nutshell, ever since I left the world of comedy, which was my original intention to pursue, I would say that man plans career in comedy and God laughs. And so since that time, I've always tried to find a way to kind of bridge the two worlds. I grew up in the world of entertainment and the world that I find myself in now, which is Judaism, and to kind of fuse those two worlds together and kind of replace what I was looking for in that world and find it in the world of spirituality and help other people do the same.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. Well, I think with that, you used your time very, very nicely and efficiently, and that gives us plenty of time to talk about the main subjects at hand here. I think this episode is very unique because we're going to give more so Jewish leaders the chance, where typically this show is really for everybody. And you know what? Everybody's a Jewish leader. You really try hard enough, everyone can be a Jewish leader in their own right.
True. It's true.
But I think this subject really is relevant to a lot of the rabbis who do listen and tune into this podcast, a lot of the Jewish thought leaders who come in, who may have been on the podcast before and are still fans of the show, which I'm always very touched by. So thank you to any previous guest who has been on the show and is now listening regularly to the podcast. The subject is, how do you speak? How do you deliver a better speech or a better sermon as a Jewish leader?
Yeah. But before we dive into that, I was listening to one of your episodes this morning, and I wanted to address the bad Jew theme, because at one point I believed myself to be a bad Jew, and that was, like I said in the intro, I grew up, I guess you could call it modern Orthodox to leaning towards the right, towards right wing. I went to Yeshiva high school, and I grew up, traditionally observant and knowing exactly what to do, and that included being Shomer Shabbat, which is keeping the rules of Shabbat as traditionally observed. And if you caught my little blurb about how I worked Saturday Night Live, so the show is live, and the show doesn't just go live in a vacuum on Saturday night. It's prepared all the way through the week, including Friday night and Shabbat. So that was my first foray into actually not being observant for the first time in my life. And it was a tough decision to make. I had never not kept Shabbat as it's meant to be kept up until that point when I was 21. So in a certain sense, I kind of felt like I was selling my soul to the devil in order to be able to pursue my dream. And it was very, very tough. It was a very, very hard thing to reconcile with. And it was not easy to be aligned, to know that this is how I grew up and this is what I believe to be right, that I should be doing, and not doing it in order just to pursue what my passion was and what my dream was. So, in my mind at that time, I very much felt that I was not a good Jew or a bad Jew, I guess you could say.
Right. You kind of just felt like an identityless, floating, like purposeless kind of thing at that point. Like, I don't, yeah, like, is that kind of like what you mean?
I wouldn't say purposeless, because I did feel like I had a purpose, even though it wasn't, let's say, a world, an eternal purpose in life. But I had a very short-term purpose, and that kept me distracted. I was super, super focused, and I was writing, and I was networking, and I was trying to do everything I could to get ahead. So I did have a short-term purpose. I wouldn't say it was my life's purpose, but it definitely kept me distracted and busy enough so that I didn't walk around depressed. But at the same time, there was always in the back of my mind this feeling that, like, I'm not doing the right thing, and I'm not in God's graces, and I really should know better. I should not be doing this, but I couldn't stop. It was a feeling that, like, I didn't have a world that could compete with that. I didn't have a Judaism that could compete with that, and it felt like, going into a world of glitter and glamour and creativity and everything comes along with entertainment, and so being in the world of celebrities, versus like a very mediocre type of existence, very mediocre. And even though I knew what was right, that when you weigh the two against each other, it was very, very, at 21 years old, it was very hard for me to, actually I was 19, I think it was 19 at the time. It's very hard to not choose the world of the glitter. So but it was very lonely. It was a very lonely time. No one, all my friends were Jewish at the time. All my upbringing, I really had never been in a non-Jewish environment, a secular environment, because I know there are a lot of Jews on SNL and network television, but I'd never been in a secular environment before, to that extent. And so it did feel very lonely, and it was tough. I walked around kind of like confused a lot.
I think that's a very relatable emotion and a very relatable experience that a lot of the listeners probably listening can definitely speak to, for sure. But going back to the main subject at hand, though, I think the value that a lot of listeners are really looking for is how to be a better speaker, how to give better speeches when it comes to Jewish spaces. What would you say is what captivates a Jewish audience?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say a Jewish audience over any audience, because we're really all people. It's just a universal, you could say, what captivates an audience, and the answer would be the same: Jewish, non-Jewish, even a foreign-speaking audience, or cavemen, for example. We all relate on certain basic human levels. In filmmaking, they say that all movies, it doesn't really matter what they're really about on the surface. Really deep down, they're all addressing human needs and wants and desires. So, for example, I don't know if you think about the most recent movie that you saw, it could be Jurassic Park or something like that, right? Or, it's not a movie about dinosaurs. It's a movie about survival. It's a movie about prestige. It's all the things that make us tick, all the lusts and the desires and the fears and the hatred and the aggressiveness and everything that kind of courses through our bones and makes us human, that we wrestle with and try to transcend. That's really what captivates an audience. So that's what Hollywood has been able to clue in on, and that's what every good speaker, I think, really understands, that audiences, everyone's going through the same thing. We're all struggling. We're all trying to overcome some type of challenge in our lives. We all want to transcend. We all want to be better than who we are right now. We all want something more for ourselves, for our children, for our family. So speakers who speak to those topics, either directly or at least indirectly, are going to have our attention. And people who just try to transmit information, who just try to just brain dump and unload information on us, not only is it useless, because for the most part, we can get it anywhere now. This is the age of information. You can just go on Google AI, you can get any answer to anything you really want to know. We don't need you for that. Everyone doesn't have to sit quietly and listen to while you just transmit information. There's much more convenient ways, much more efficient ways in order to be able to get that. So really what is going to resonate with an audience. This is when you speak to them, what they're going through directly or even indirectly, and then that they'll perk up and they'll say, hey, this is important. I need to hear this information. I call it investment, audience investment. And the only way to get, unless you're entertaining people, the only way to get people to continue listening to you is that if they're invested in hearing what you have to say. And information is not, people are not invested, unless it's like, where's the medicine that I need in order to stay alive? For the most part, people don't get invested in information. That nothing get anywhere.
Yeah, something that I've been very conscious of as someone who is very focused on my marketing is ethos, pathos, and logos. And those are the three modes of communication that was discussed. And, I took a communication class. We practiced public speaking. And I would say that the lesson about how to implement and how to leverage ethos and pathos and logos was probably the most important lesson that I've used to this day. Bad Jew, the phrase alone is based on ethos, pathos, and logos. So if you want to dissect my album art for a second and what I've done, okay? So let's first identify what ethos, pathos, and logos are for those who don't know. Ethos is the information. It's the Latin word for information. Pathos, like the word empath, are the emotions. And logos, the logic, right? So if we look at the album art, and if we look at the general idea of what my show is doing, and any speaking engagement for that matter, but outside of a podcast, right? There's tons of information. People want that information. They want to learn, but they could also get that same kind of learning from a book. They could get that same kind of learning from any other podcast out there. There's a reason why Bad Jew has become the number 16 most listened to Jewish learning podcast in the US. And that's because there's an emotional side. First of all, I use a pain word. I'm thinking about my sales training right now. I did Sandler sales training.
No way.
For a couple of years. Yeah. And so when I chose the phrase bad Jew, first of all, besides it being a common expression that we've heard, there's a whole practice in what's called the pain funnel for how to identify and how to use pain words to leverage a sale, to create an ROI. And so that's where the phrase bad comes from, right? And we know that it's for Jews. That's the ethos, right? Or maybe that's the logo, is the logic behind it. And so I think the logic really that people understand when they see a phrase like bad Jew for a podcast, that they understand, okay, this is a place where we can make Judaism more relatable. So that way people can attain their information in a more meaningful way. But the pathos, what I'm really trying to evoke here is let's get as many emotional stories in every episode as possible. Let's try to, in that 4-minute bad Jew challenge, let's figure out where people maybe have felt like a bad Jew, and let's see what kind of Jewish journey there is. I think it's really important to display with all of our guests that have been on the show that everyone has their own unique Jewish journey, and yet at the same time, it's also similar. And I think the idea of being a bad Jew has been felt by every single person. And I think back to different speakers that have come onto the show, like Kosha Dills. He was actually one of the first guests on the show. Kosha Dills came on the podcast and he talked about how he felt like a bad Jew growing up. In some ways, he still feels like a bad Jew, which is crazy because he's such a great megaphone for the Jewish world right now with his hip hop music and him putting himself out there in different philanthropies and the different runs that he does. And it's amazing. He's a really incredible guy. So
yeah.
But I think that there's a lot to speak there on that.
Yeah. I wonder how that got baked into our consciousness that we all kind of feel on some level that we're not measuring up to being God's grace with them. I don't know where that comes from, but.
Well, I would say that I think it's this. I think it's that when you hear the phrase for the first time, 613 commandments, your first thought is, I mean, like at the end of the day, it sounds like a number that you could probably easily count. You might take a little bit of time, but to go through it, 613. But then to actually keep track of all 613 rules, I bet you the grand majority of people who are listening to this podcast don't actually know all 613 commandments. And guess what, listeners? I don't either, okay? What I also came to learn that gave me a sigh of relief is that it's actually physically impossible for one human to fulfill all 613 commandments, because some commandments are geared only towards men and other commandments are geared only towards women. Some commandments are only geared towards the times of the second temple. And so we don't have a temple currently, so there are commandments that we just simply can't fulfill. But if we all go back to the golden rule of the Torah, or the golden rule of the Bible, depending on how you want to phrase it, do unto others as you do unto yourself, and the rest is all commentary. So that's how you just act as a Jew, not even as a good Jew, just a Jew. And so there's this idea, though, that there's all these rules. It's so daunting. All the halacha. If you just look at the areas of kashrut, of kosher, it's so daunting to go through that whole list. It feels like it's like the law of Indiana Jones getting to the treasure. If you remember, like him tiptoeing through the floors that could fall below him, and then like the little darts that shoot left and right through the hallways. That's what it feels like navigating all the halacha now.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, the bar is very high for what we're expected to fulfill. So maybe that's where it comes from. It's just a very daunting task. But when you start to zero in on the fact that it's for your benefit, that I think is the game changer, at least for me. That it's not like we're trying to win the graces of God or anything. It's really just for our benefit, and then it just changes the paradigm.
Absolutely. Going back to the topic of being a speaker, though, I wonder in your experience, what are some moments where you've really seen from a talk that you've given, or in a sermon that you've provided, or any kind of story that you've told? When have you really noticed a kind of shift in the attention that an audience or a congregation might give you? When do you know that you've truly captured an audience?
Well, for me, it's actually simpler, I think, than for most public speakers, because, like I said, I have a background in stand-up comedy. So a stand-up comic is hyper attuned to audience reaction. You are measured. Jerry Seinfeld likes to say, he said, there's no one that's more judged in human society than a stand-up comedian, meaning every 12 seconds, you need to win back the audience with another laugh. And it's probably even less than that. But you're basically being rated every 10 seconds. 5 times a minute, 6 times a minute, you're being rated whether or not you're good. So you need to learn very quickly, in order to survive, how to hold onto an audience's attention and engagement, whether actually you're getting a laugh at that moment. You can't go from like boredom to laughter. There's engagement, laughter, engagement, laughter, engagement. So even at your least successful time during that minute of getting laughs per minute, you still need to keep people engaged. So you are hyper attuned. You can almost it's like a palpable feeling. You learn to fly with it like sonar, like a bat or something like that. Where you Jerry Seinfeld, I always harken back to him because he's such a master of his craft. He says, you can play me back my laughs from a set, and I can tell you the financial status of the people laughing. That no, an audience. It's an entity. It's an organism to him. So that's the kind of mindset that a stand-up comedian has. And you can see it. You can see when people are dialed in, they're locked in, they're engaged. You can see when you start to lose people. It's like this. Like I said, it's kind of like you're flying with sonar, with a certain type of calibration that your mind works almost subconsciously. So when you get up to public speak, it's you would think, oh wow, now I don't have to get laughs. It's super simple. Like I can just actually talk without trying to make people laugh. There's no goal here. But it's the same thing, because people will. You're right. You're not trying to get laughed, but you need to still keep people engaged the entire time. And if you don't, then a regular public speaker might not even notice that he's lost the audience 10 minutes back. I can tell right away when people drift, and when so to answer your question, how do I know when people are locked in? I can tell right away. It's very, very simple. The breathing gets lower. People are, their eyes are on you. They're not. They might put down something that they were looking at. They maybe they'll shift their position in their seat to kind of move a little closer to you. It's a certain feeling that I have that I can tell right away when I have it, and I can tell when people don't have it too. And it's frustrating because attention spans are very low now. So it's very, very hard to hold on to people's attention. But I remember there was a woman in the crowd once when I was giving a sermon, And she told my wife afterwards, she said, sometimes I have to stop myself from calling out in the middle of his sermon because I feel like he's talking, like I'm the only person in the room, like he's talking just to me. And like that's the kind of thing that you don't get by unless you know how to hold an audience's attention, and I'm sure she wasn't the only person who felt that way. It harkens back to the subjects that you speak about. If you're talking about things that are really deeply important to people that they're invested in hearing about, they'll listen to you, and they'll listen as long as you're speaking.
Absolutely. One of the best teachers I ever had in college was not even in my major, which my major was cinema. I studied film, but one of the best teachers I ever had was a Dr. Carrington who taught variations in human sexuality. And it was a 300-person class, and he would speak in front of us, and he was on a stage in a TED Talk-like fashion. And it felt like, he was such a good speaker that it felt like I was in the room one-on-one with him. I remember one day I see him just walking to his building. It was like during lunchtime. There's like in the main like social plaza. And I stopped Dr. Carrington. Dr. Carrington, hey, how are you? I just want to say I loved last week's class. And he said, thanks. Have I met you yet? And it occurred to me, oh yeah, that's right. I never met the guy. I never had met the guy.
But you felt really close to him.
Oh, I felt really close to him. He was great.
Yeah.
He's still one of my favorite teachers to this day. Just the way that he spoke and the way he carried himself. Again, a weekly TED Talk by the Dr. Carrington. Pretty
Right.
cool. I hope Dr. Carrington, if you ever do hear this podcast, that you please do slide into my DMs. I would love to hear from you.
Well, I'd have had an edge because his topic is naturally fascinating.
It's a very fascinating topic that has Judaism has so much to say about it. We just did an episode on the podcast called "Can Jews Be Transgender?" And we talked about the Talmud's perspective on gender, which is really cool. We did that with Israel's Big Brother's Michael Alroy.
Yeah.
Really a great person. The other thing as well this reminded me of is, so I go to Ashlit on a regular basis. Ashlit's like a part of Aish Torah in LA. And late last year, they were doing a l'chaim. They were doing a bunch of l'chaims at their Shabbat. And for those who don't know, l'chaims are like positive speeches that you give during Shabbat to kind of set the mood, set the tone. Typically, they're given a prompt, and maybe they give you a shot of whatever liquor you choose to drink to say l'chaim to. It's a good time. And so I was chosen for a l'chaim, and I stood up, and I'm not going to say specifically what I said because I actually would like to make a future episode. I don't want to give this away yet, but I will say that this was right after October 7th happened. And in my attempt to escape a little bit of reality and to watch some TV to get my mind off of things, I ended up watching a movie that made me think that this is the most Zionist film ever made. And it didn't even intend to be a Zionist. And I'm not going to say what it is. I'll one day make a special episode about this. But I did a speech about it. And when I first said the title of the movie, everyone was so like in disbelief. Like, what? Was he trolling us? What's he talking about? And then I started to explain the symbolism of everything that was being described in the movie. And then I suddenly heard everyone start to quiet down and focus in. Even the rabbi and his wife started to listen. They were kind of in amazement. The rabbi later on came to me and said, that's the speech of a good rabbi right there. And that was like the biggest compliment that he had ever given me. My rabbi, Rabbi Jack Malol, saying, that's the speech of a rabbi right there, where you can connect things that are not related and make it so concise and really apply the logos, like what I was saying earlier. Great. It was a great time.
Yeah, there's a rabbi that I interviewed for my podcast he has a famous sermon structure. I think it might be a little bit outdated, but he calls it the H structure, where you take something, the vertical construct of a capital H. So you have one line over here, one vertical line, and you introduce something that's completely, I would say random, but disconnected, not necessarily related to your subject. So, for example, a movie that is probably the furthest thing in your mind that could have anything to do with Zionism, and then you leave it, and then you go to that middle line, that H, the middle line of the H, the horizontal line, and you talk about whatever you got to talk about, And then the final H is where you reconnect. So you reconnect that middle line there. And then it comes full circle and everybody's like, oh, I get it now. That makes sense. So it sounds like you did an H, that you did a capital H with that little speech.
I would like to think so. Thank you for that. I'd never heard
Yeah.
that expression before, but I like it.
Yeah.
Speaking of strategies, what are some practical ways that people can get into better public speaking practices?
Well, when you talk about public speaking, and I think it's a misnomer because people, when they think of public speaking, they think, how can I be a better, more polished, more professional speaker? How can I eliminate the filler word? What should I do with my hands when I talk? Should I move around? Should I use notes? Those types of things. And I don't focus on any of that. My method, the Maggid method, has nothing to do with being a professional or polished type of speaker. It's really about being an authentic speaker, being a genuine speaker. You and I are talking with each other. We know how to talk with each other. We're connecting and enjoying each other's company. But we're just speaking one-on-one. Something changes in a person's mind when he's on a raised platform, sometimes with a microphone in hand behind a lectern, and there's 300 people. And then all of a sudden, now I think, well, this is formal. I have to be a professional. I have to use sophisticated words that I wouldn't use in an ordinary conversation. And I have to gesticulate, and I have to, put a lot of pomp and all that. And it actually ruins things. It totally detracts from having a normal, intimate conversation with people one-on-one, which is really what an audience is. It's just 300 one-to-ones. And if you can figure out how to look at an audience as a collection of individuals, that's when you can really start to go back to your authentic self, where you're transforming people on a daily basis, one-to-one. People like you. You have friends. You accomplish things, achieve things. Just keep that. Just keep maintain what worked for you, and just do that while you're speaking from a platform or podium or whatever it is. And that's the trick. The trick is to not get phased by the formality of the setting, of the environment, and the number of people. The analogy I always like to use is, I don't know if you saw the movie Man on Wire, the documentary about the guy who walked across the.
Oh, yes, I have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. So what's interesting is that it showed him training for that, and what he trains, and it's only maybe I don't know, 5 feet or 6 feet off the ground, and then he's doing the same thing on top of the world, across the World Trade Center, and that's, I don't know, 150 stories off the ground or whatever it is. But it's really, except for maybe a little bit of wind, there's really no difference between being 4 feet off the ground or 150 feet off the ground. It's the same wire you have to get from point A to point B. The only thing that changes is when you start to think about the stakes, when you start to think about oh no, if I fall, I'm dead, versus if I fall 4 feet off the ground, I'll, skin my knee. So that's what I try to really drill into my client when I talk about public speaking is that it doesn't matter if it's 3,000 people or 3 people. It takes the same skills, takes the same effort. You have a microphone. You don't have to project your voice anymore. You don't change. Just try to keep it as authentic, as intimate as possible. I heard one famous rabbi call his sermons. He said it's elevated living room conversation. And I think that's an amazing term. That's really what you want. You're having, even though you're the only one speaking, it's a conversation. It's conversational.
A really great analogy. Really great. Really great. Well, Rabbi Daniel, what is the best way for people to contact you should they want to learn how to speak better in front of a congregation?
So the truth is that I have a template, and you can download it at maggidmethod.com, MAGGID METHOD, maggidmethod.com. There's a template there. It's a 5-step template. You can download it and kind of incorporate the method, absorb it, see if it worked for you. And it like I said, it's for universal audiences, Jewish, non-Jewish, presentation. It's about how to connect with people, how to transform people, how to take the focus off the information more on the transformation, and how to get people invested in listening to you from start to finish. So
awesome. Rabbi Daniel Steinberg, thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you for coming on to teach other Jewish thought leaders and Jewish leaders in general how to better present themselves and how to better captivate an audience, and also providing your resources through Maggid Method. I really love what you guys are doing. And to the listeners, I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of Bad Jew. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Shalom.